So, apparently Klingon music is supposed to be microtonal. What? Nuknech. Welcome to the nerdiest music theory video you're ever gonna see. So, it all started last week when I was rewatching the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode for The Uniform. This is the famous arc of episodes where Captain Sisko tracks down Maquis traitor Michael Eddington, culminating in the most badass and highly questionable captain moment in all of Star Trek.
You expect me to believe that a decorated Starfleet officer, the pride of the service, is going to poison an entire planet?
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
You're bluffing.
Am I? Commander, launch torpedoes. Commander, I said launch torpedoes.
In this episode, Security Chief Odo intercepts a Maquis communique containing a coded Breen nursery rhyme.
It's written on a Lixian scale. I ran it through the computer too. No meaningful pattern.
I heard that and I thought, whoa there, Constable. Hang on. Lixian? I know a thing or two about music theory and I've never heard of the Lixian scale. So I Googled it. And to my utter surprise, it actually exists. And this is what it sounds like. Of course, it didn't exist in 1997 when this episode was being filmed and baby Levi was taking his first steps 100 miles away from the Paramount lot. As far as I can tell, the Lixian scale was formalized in 2019 with the publication of Justin Payco's The Dozenal Standard, a book which attempts to define all possible scale permutations within the octave and recontextualize music theory itself in a base 12 duodecimal system. Whew. Hang on, I'm gonna have to explain that because it's gonna be very relevant when we examine Klingon music later, which apparently is not just supposed to be microtonal, but it was also written in base 3. I told you this was gonna get nerdy. Most of the world today uses a base 10 decimal system. This means that we count things in groups of 10. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then if we want to go higher, we'll need to combine digits. So 10 plus 1, 10 plus 2, 10 plus 3, etc. In a base 12 system, we have 12 numbers, 1 through 9, plus 2 additional numbers commonly called dec and L, before we restart on 10, now called do. So instead of 13, 14, and 15, we now have do 1, do 2, do 3. Linguists think that we probably developed a base 10 system because, well, we have 10 fingers, so it's a pretty natural way to count. Although others, like maths historian Georges Ifra, have pointed out that you can just as easily count knuckle bones to get to a base 12 system that feels pretty natural as well. Guidonian hand, anyone? Base 12 is often used in measurements. A foot is 12 inches. A day is 2 parts of 12 hours each. If you bake, you know as well as I do, dozenal counting is your friend. The implicit argument in the dozenal standard is that Western music uses a 12-note system. So for music, a dozenal or duodecimal system of counting actually makes quite a bit of sense. Now, whether you buy that argument or not is up to you. The other and more relevant goal the dozenal standard seeks to achieve is to name every possible scale we can create in 12-tone equal temperament. You heard that correctly, every single one. Each possible scale permutation is assigned a 3-letter code name with the suffix IAN tagged on the end. Lixian happens to be scale number 1859. In other words, it's a complete coincidence. This Lixian has absolutely nothing to do with the Lixian that's in the Breen nursery rhyme. Although I guess I gotta give credit where credit is due, it's a pretty cool sounding scale. Clearly, the writers of Star Trek were throwing out bogus music theory jargon with the same gall as their techno-babble buzzwords.
It just occurred to me that I could set up a frequency harmonic between the deflector and the shield grid using the warp field generator as a power flow anti-attenuator, and that, of course, naturally created an amplification of the inherent energy output.
See that?
But it got me thinking, what else does Star Trek have to say about music? I mean, even if it's complete nonsense, maybe it'll lead me to something interesting like the dozenal standard. So for the past week, I've been diving deep into the Trek archives, poring over script after script in search of even a whisper of some sort of subspace polyrhythmic distortion. And while, I didn't find that, I bet you might be able to guess what I did find.
Do you know any Klingon opera?
It's a collection of my favorite Klingon operas.
Klingon Opera.
Seriously, so much Klingon opera.
If it wasn't for me, you'd still be drifting around in an escape pod singing Klingon opera.
My Klingon operas.
You can't learn to appreciate Klingon opera by cramming for the exam the night before.
He never varies his performance, not even by a half tone.
Doctor, if a Klingon were to kill me, I'd expect nothing less than an entire opera on the subject.
I was hooked. I was tractor beamed by the ghostly calls of Melota. I fell into the rabbit hole of all rabbit holes. Or should I say wormhole? Is that too much? I bought a Klingon dictionary for Kayla's sake. I consulted with the Klingon Language Institute, which is apparently a thing that exists. I even uncovered the most esoteric paper I've ever seen on the genesis of Klingon music theory. So today I'd like to try and answer the question, what is Klingon music supposed to sound like? In the end, you'll be left with 3 possible answers, with 3 radically different but mind-blowingly weird and fun approaches to music that I hope will leave you feeling inspired to make your music just a little bit more Klingon. But before we shuttle all the way to Kronos, just like your favorite millionaire pop star, I'd like to crane our heads back towards Earth for a second and take in the brilliance of the pale blue dot. That brilliance isn't the wonder that we're all but grains of sand amongst the ocean that is the cosmos. That brilliance isn't the mind-bending improbability that quantum fluctuations some 13 billion years ago eventually led to you sitting here watching a video about Klingon music theory. That brilliance is brilliant. No, really, it's Brilliant. That's the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant is a learning app which helps you get smarter every day with thousands of interactive lessons in math, science, programming, and data analysis. I'm taking a course right now on the history of math. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians did multiplication through a process which converted numbers to binary? I never knew that, and I probably never would have if I wasn't on Brilliant. What I like best about the app is that you learn by doing, and it's way more fun this way. They let you manipulate data and problems visually, which is a much more intuitive way to learn compared to traditional textbooks. Whether it's a course on calculus, circuits, or the basics of how to code in Python, Brilliant's got you covered. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Levi McLean or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Now back to Kronos. Kaplach!
Klingon is a guttural language. It says in the script that Krug, who's the main Klingon villain in the film, says in his guttural Klingon, and then there's the line. Well, if Krug is supposed to speak in guttural Klingon, I better add some guttural sounds. So I added a sound and a sound, which is different.
This is Mark Okrand. He's the linguist who we have to thank for bringing the Klingon language to life on and off screen. In Mark's book, Klingon for the Galactic Traveler, he writes that older Klingon music is based on a nonatonic 9-note scale. This is not an octatonic scale within 12-tone equal temperament, but rather an entire tuning system unto itself comprised of 9 equally spaced notes. So we're talking about 9-tone equal temperament, or 9-Edo. In other words, Klingon music, according to the guy who wrote the language itself, is supposed to be microtonal.
Actually, it's macrotonal, technically.
I was surprised to read this at first, but the more and more I learned about Klingon culture, the more it made sense. Mark has mentioned on many occasions that his method when it came to Klingon was to do more or less the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do in English. So Klingon's making music in a wildly different tuning system than what you'd expect to hear as a Western English speaker is actually pretty on brand. Woohoo! Internal linguistic and philosophical consistency. Let's go! It's worth noting here that the actual music in the show falls short of this description. You won't find any canon Star Trek soundtracks that are remotely in 9-Edo. But it's a heck of a lot of fun to imagine what this might sound like, and I presume even more fun to actually bring it to life. So let's try and do that. Here are the 9 notes of what a Klingon might call Yav-rad-qih, meaning scale or spectrum. This Yav-rad-qih has its own solfège. Starting with our root note U, we have Yu, Bim, Losh, Var, Jav, Shoch, Chor, Chut, and Yu. I don't speak Klingon, by the way, so my apologies if I butcher any pronunciations, to the 2 Klingonists who may be watching this video. Just like in our Western system, the Klingon system also ends on Yu, back at the octave. Except on a hyper-technical level here, Klingon would probably consider this a nonave or a nonev, because an octave kind of implies a very specific Terran understanding of music, an understanding that a pre-Federation contacted Klingon civilization just wouldn't have. It's unclear whether or not Klingons preferred a fixed Yu or a movable Yu system, but if they're anything like us, there's probably much debate on the subject. What is clear from the Klingon dictionary is that Klingons originally used a base 3 counting system, or a ternary system. So in English, we would want to count this Yav-rad-qih something like 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 13, 21, 22, 23. In Klingon, the numbers 4 through 9 are the same as their solfège, while numbers 1 through 3 have their own unique names. From a, derivational linguistic perspective, this is actually pretty clever, because you can actually see the language developing in response to historical shifts in culture in its numeric presentation. Klingons originally used a base 3 counting system, right? So you'd only need names for numbers 0 through 3. I should note that there is some debate in the community on whether or not pre-warp Klingons had a concept of 0 or not. It's a little up in the air, and honestly, I don't even want to deal with it, so I'm just going to throw it out the window and pretend like it doesn't exist. Anyway, assuming that the concept of 0 did exist for this non-existent fictional race, we would only need names for numbers 0 through 3. But as the Empire expanded, Klingons would find themselves in more regular contact with outsiders who primarily used a base 10 system. A need for more precise language to accommodate this arose, and eventually the Klingon language would adopt a base 10 system entirely. But rather than making up completely new words for numbers 4 through 9, the Klingon Solfege was used to fill the gap. As it happens, 9-Edo works really well with a base 3 system, not so well with a base 10 system. These numerical and musical systems were meant to reflect cultural motifs: the Klingon trinity of honor, duty, and loyalty, the 3 blades of the Empire's crest, and the 3 trials of Kahless, just to name a few examples. The sources tell us that Klingon music is mostly vocal in nature, so what the heck. Let's give it the good old college try. You bim losh vag jav soch chor chut you. Notice that the smallest step here is considerably larger than what we're used to in 12. In other words, stop your typing right now. I'm not out of tune. I'm just singing in microtonal Klingon, obviously. In 12 tet, our minor second is 100 cents, compared to the Klingon system where the same interval amounts to about 133 cents, which to me feels almost more like a neutral second, which is definitely going to make things a lot spicier, but who knows? Maybe that's a good thing. In a discussion paper on the Klingon tuning system, theorist Xavier von Versch observes that Klingon music is all about embracing dissonance. If Klingon culture is all about symmetry in thirds and embracing dissonance, then I can't really think of a better tuning system than 9-Edo. In his article, 9-Edo, 3 Augmented Triads in Perfect Harmony, Rich Cochrane, presumably no relation to Zephram Cochrane, the fictional inventor of Earth's first warp drive system, argues that the pillars of this tuning system are founded in 3 interlocking augmented chords. The first is formed on Yu and would be Edo stepped as 0, 3, 6. The second is on Bim, 1, 4, and 7. And finally on that's 2, 5, and 8. 3 equally spaced augmented chords, symmetry and dissonance coalescing into 3 equilateral triangles that make up the pillars of this tuning system. In my last video on poly-microtonality, I mentioned the impressionist composition technique called planing. This is essentially where you apply the same quality, like all major and all minor, to every single chord in a given key. Basically, you apply the same structure across all chords consistently. This is what's happening here, but with an augmented structure instead. 9-Edo is a natural ally to the planing method. This can be a really interesting way to write, for sure, but at the end of the day, with only 3 chords, all of them pretty much just being transpositions of the same chord, things can get a little boring. New chords can be created by swapping single points in your target chord with that of a neighboring triangle. This will generate us 6 new triads to work with. We can also split up each leg of the chord and distribute it amongst each augmented triangle. This will get you the spiciest of the bass Klingon chords. And of course, we can probably still get away with our minor and major triads, but the purity of our fifths will suffer, being about 33 cents off from its justly intonated counterpart. Already, with this framework alone, we can do some pretty interesting things. Take a listen. I wonder, what would a more melodic approach look like for the Klingon tuning system? Let's take a melody, what Klingons would call Ingshav, and compare it in 12 with how it would sound in 9. Wow, that's, I'm not gonna lie, that was it was a little bit wonky. I feel like it sounds like how I imagine Gach to taste. But hang on a minute, let's not give up too soon. Remember the 45th rule of acquisition: expand or die. Maybe if we just expanded our arrangement, we could make something work. We just gotta do it how a Klingon would do it. First off, instrumentation. Although Klingons have a word for piano, that's fundamentally a human instrument, and honestly, not very well suited for microtonality. If we want to be true to the warrior's spirit, then we're gonna need a warrior's instrument. The chush-ur, a traditional stringed Klingon instrument, might do the trick. We never actually get to see one on screen, but in the Next Generation book, Power Hungry, it's described as a dull finished wood, pear-shaped string instrument standing about 60 centimeters tall. Coincidentally, that almost perfectly describes the oud, so not only am I gonna have to learn how to play this thing, but I'm gonna have to learn to do it in 9-tone equal temperament. In case you were wondering, in this book, Worf actually tries out for Riker's jazz band with his chush-ur, but apparently doesn't have the chops to cut it in the commander's own.
Sorry.
Animal skin drums are also popular on the Klingon homeworld, apparently. There's even a note for historical performance practice on hand drums in Klingon for the Galactic Traveler. It's pretty neat. So essentially what is written is that Klingons will do 2 different strikes. They'll do a palm strike, that's called wek, and then they'll do klau, which is a fist strike, of course, it's a fifth. So basically you alternate between the two. We also have descriptions of certain bowed instruments that are reminiscent of violins and cellos. Fun fact, the word for bow in Klingon is also used to mean sword. Okay, so now that we have instrumentation squared away, let's try and reharmonize our Ingshav within the context of this Klingon harmonic system. Okay, so that's one option for a vision of Klingon music. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the first IRL opera entirely written in Klingon. It's called Universe, or in Klingon, U. The opera premiered in September of 2010. This Klingon music is very different from the Klingon music I just showed you. It isn't grounded in an equally tempered 9-note tuning system, but rather a justly intonated one. Or at least that's the ideal. I mean, after all, Klingons are Klingons and humans are humans. Which brings me to the most obscure and esoteric music theory paper I think I've ever stumbled across. This paper is taken from a larger work which detailed musical, theatrical, and philosophical elements that made up the opera. It's called A Comprehensive Introduction to Klingon Music Theory. It doesn't appear that this paper is publicly available, and I didn't get explicit permission to share it, so I'm going to do my best here to just describe it as accurately as I possibly can. In this formulation of Klingon opera, everything from instruments to tuning to storyline is all based around a concept called Yav-rad-qih, which basically, but not literally, translates to beginning, middle, and end. Everything starts with Yav. It's ground, it's base, it's beginning. Nothing can exist without Yav. From the endpoints of Yav come equally curved lines meeting to form Rad. Rad is movement, it's development, it's the living dynamics that makes Klingon culture so colorful. Qih is impact, it's conclusion, it's closure. But it's also a new beginning. According to the Klingon creation myth, the gods created a heart to pass the time. The triangle of Klingon philosophy, now a pendulum representing the warrior's beating heart. The legend says that alone, the heart grew weaker and weaker, and so the gods created a second heart to warm the first. Together, the two hearts beat as one with such strength that the first sound was sung. Then something happened that the gods did not expect. The earth shook, the skies trembled, and the gods were destroyed by their own creation. Conflict, glory, struggle are the essence of the Klingon heart. Without their gods, they began to fight each other, and so their hearts split, dividing Yav in half and in thirds. If we think of these lines as strings, we have an octave and a perfect fifth. The hearts split further as we connect Yav to Rad, a major third. We are told that the Klingons use intervals from Rad to develop harmony. A final split at the Yav endpoints gets us the subminor third, perfect fourth, major sixth, and harmonic seventh. This is based in a justly intonated system. And while not represented in this triangle, we are told that the tritone at a ratio of 7:5 is also included as a popular way to conclude a harmonic progression or a musical phrase. Here is mode 1 of the Klingon scale as described in the text. Now, we're told time and time again that Klingon music is quite dissonant. So what's up with the scale? I mean, it's pretty consonant. It's got a lot of consonant intervals in there. So where is all of this dissonance? Well, remember when I said to imagine our line segments as strings? Well, what if we took that literally and they really were? You'll notice that our line C is our hypotenuse. It's literally longer than B, which I guess that's the definition of hypotenuse. Using the Pythagorean theorem, we can find out exactly how much longer. If we compare these two lengths and convert it to cents, we'll find that the difference in length between these two strings amounts to about 31 cents, or about a third of a semitone. So this string is off from this string by about 31 cents. This creates a beating effect, which in Klingon culture is sought out. Perhaps it reminds them of the importance of the beating heart in their own mythology. Each of these lines constitutes their own unique tuning system, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit crazy. Because according to this paper, it is common practice in Klingon opera that each character plays in a different tuning system. That's right, not only is Klingon music microtonal, but it's poly-microtonal. This tuning clash between different voices is like the ultimate expression of Klingon dissonance. The paper ends with a cheeky recommendation of a symbol hidden within the Klingon music theory triangle, one which I'm lovingly and hopefully appropriately calling the Klingon chord. In the end, we're left with three possible options for how Klingon music might work. One rooted in a description from the linguist who invented the language, a 9-Edo tuning system. One stemming from a real-life Klingon opera, a system coming from just intonation whose microtonality is found in the pitch displacement between voices, a fundamentally polymicrotonal approach. And one that I didn't cover, but that I feel is obligatory to mention, the actual music of the actual show, whose microtonality, if at all, is definitely unintentional. Each says something different about music. Each approaches music differently. All of them clash with each other. But maybe that's the most Klingon thing of all, to find beauty in the struggle, to find consonance in the dissonance, to not just write music in Klingon, but to write music in the spirit of Klingon. Jordy and I would like to say a huge thank you to all of our patrons now currently on screen. I didn't think it was possible to get more niche than microtonal music theory, but somehow I've done it with Star Trek microtonal music theory, so I really appreciate all of our patrons who support the channel, because without you, I could never make this video. When you join our microtonalist tier, you get access to the Microtonalist Manual, an ever-growing resource containing everything you'd ever need to know about making music in 31 Edo or how to make music with microtones. This includes tuning files, lecture notes, academic papers, and a bunch of exclusive videos like my hour-long lecture series on 31 Edo for the modern musician, the many sevenths of 31, microdrift modulation techniques, and much, much more. We also have different sample packs and sampler instruments that appear in a lot of my videos available to all of my patrons, as well as a handful of bass and production lessons. Come study with us. I make it a point to make myself available to all of our patrons to answer questions, geek out on cool music theory stuff, and help foster a thriving community of microtonal music theory nerds. We await you with open arms, and of course, a whole lot of notes.